Welcome to the No Guts No Galaxy podcast number 191. I'm your host and resident wizard, Daeron. Support for this podcast is brought to you by our patrons and Twitch subscribers. As I'm no longer contracted by Piranha Games, your support means more than ever and literally keeps this content on the air. Would you like to support the podcast? Become a Twitch sub today at twitch.tv/NGNGTV or find out more about becoming a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/NoGutsNoGalaxy. So today's podcast is a special one. It's one that I've been waiting for a very long time, literally years. Our special guest today is Sean Kolton. He is the music composer and sound designer at Piranha Games for both MechWarrior Online and MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. I've been, seeing Sean and talking to Sean for years. Every year we go up to MechCon, we hang out, we talk, and throughout the year I've always been hitting him up for either audio files or just to talk about various aspects of the sound and the music. Awesome guy. I've gotten to know him pretty well, and I really respect what he does and appreciate all of the music and the sounds that we get in the game. And so it's a cool interview, one that I've been waiting for a long time. We finally got down to do it, and I think that excitement shows, and that the interview itself goes almost 2 hours. It was like an hour and 40 minutes. So this is a long podcast. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you want more of these types of interviews. What's not included in today's podcast is the usual discussion about, whatever's happening in my life, news, movies, TV, books, games, etc. And I also don't get into the news about MechWarrior Online, MechWarrior 5, BattleTech, and so forth. So that will be coming in a future podcast. Hopefully tomorrow. I'll be recording that on Friday. And I'm thinking about doing regular podcasts. Well, basically what I'm thinking about doing is podcasts on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right now. So the Wednesday podcast would typically be one where I have a guest and it will run longer. And then I'm thinking about doing just like a discussion and news podcast on Mondays and Fridays. So again, let me know in the comments if that's something that you guys want to hear, if that's something you would enjoy. I want to put out podcasts that you guys want and, that you're enjoying. So let me know. Other than that, I'm going to get right into this because, like I said, this is a special interview, special podcast for me, and I don't want to waste any more time getting to it. So we're going to kick it off. This is Sean Kolton, composer and sound designer at Piranha Games, and here we go. Enjoy.
And now for something completely different.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi. Welcome to the future.
Remember, no guts, no galaxy.
All right, and we are going to get to our special guest for today. I'm very excited because this is a guest that I've been wanting to speak with for years, literally for many years. I've seen him every year in December up in Canada, MechCons and so forth, and talked to him all throughout the year in regards to his music and his audio in both MechWarrior Online and MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, the new release. I am, of course, talking about Sean Kolton, the audio guru for said titles. And I suppose your title, your official title for what you do with Piranha Games is composer and sound designer. Is that correct, Sean? And welcome to the podcast.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. My title, it pretty much covers it. I mean, it's everything audio, really. I mean, as I've mentioned, I think to you privately, wasn't really doing much with the dialogue stuff this time around, but
you're talking in regards to MechWarrior 5.
Yeah, MechWarrior 5, but yeah, so sound design and music. Yeah, anything that kind of comes out of the speakers that makes
anything
noise.
That you're listening to.
Yes.
Yeah, but you were involved in voiceover or voice acting with MechWarrior Online and trailers and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. I was handling it all at one point.
Right.
And so it may change in the future. I don't know.
Cool. So now, do you self-identify more as a musician, or do you self-identify more as just sound and audio, everything? You're into it all?
Yeah, I think all of it, just because it really is pretty equally weighted. I mean, even if NWO was more weighted towards just sound design. So I would say both I kind of that's why I probably audio designer could be another term that can get thrown around. I mean, there's lots of titles that can get thrown around
Sure.
for what I do, but
The main thing is you like to make noise
I like to make
and
noise.
record it.
Yes, I do. Exactly, exactly.
Which we all I don't know if I could say we all did, but I did a lot of that as a kid. And as I'd mentioned, I do have some music in my history back when I was a teenager in my 20s and so forth. And one of the things I did was I ran a little music magazine out of California, and I would interview a lot of musicians and artists and so forth. And back then, I always had a question that I'd ask. It was kind of how I kicked off interviews, and that is, what's in your CD player right now? Obviously, we don't live in that era as much. I mean, people are still listening to CDs, but the gist of the question is, what are you listening to right now? What are some things, if you were to jump in your car right now or relax and turn on your speakers, what are we going to hear?
Oh, wow, this is a big question.
Of course.
Because I could go on for hours about the music I listen to. Well, right now it's been definitely kind of experimenting with some new stuff I haven't listened to in the past, like or I've been aware of but haven't delved into, I guess you could say. So one thing has been a lot of funkadelic Parliament stuff.
Nice bass.
Yeah.
Do you play bass?
I play bass because out of necessity, being a guitar player,
Sure.
I guess, and doing it all myself. But I've always liked bass, and definitely, Funkadelic and Parliament really put that in the forefront.
Good stuff. Yeah.
Really good stuff. And it's, if you like, it's kind of like is a big, which I didn't actually know. It shows I was just a bit ignorant about it. Is that there's a big Hendrix influence in the music, and I'm a huge Jimi Hendrix fan, and so I was listening to some of this stuff, and I was just like, wow, it just takes Hendrix and takes it into a whole funky new level, and lots of experimentation, which I always love.
Right.
No boundaries, I felt. So yeah, I've been listening to a ton of that. I've finally got into the loop of Devo.
Whip
band, yeah, Whip It, that I've always pigeonholed as the Whip It band, and I'm sure I'm the only one.
Sure.
Even though some of the artists that I have a huge amount of respect for always cite Devo as an influence,
Yeah.
I just couldn't bring myself to listen to them for whatever reason. But by chance, and YouTube is great for this, is that you happen to click on a link, and next thing you know, you're converted because you've heard music you haven't heard before, and you're like, wow, this is getting the hairs in the back of my neck standing up. And and I found that with Devo, I gone through their catalog, and I just really, really digging their stuff. I mean, I think it's fantastic music. It's interesting music. The message that they portrayed and the image I thought was terrific, especially 30 years ago.
They're like an onion, And I did recently hear, what's the main guy from Devo, the one that's still working in the industry, doing TV and
Mark. I'll mispronounce his last name, so I won't butcher.
Well, I heard him on a recent podcast, and he's very involved in music and TV and soundtracks, and very intelligent, and I loved, very well spoken, great interview. I heard him on a recent podcast, and yeah, it's fun when you find an artist who you kind of pigeonhole, or you think you have your head wrapped around. Like Devo would be easy to write off as a one-hit wonder and not a lot of depth, but they're a total onion. You start getting into it, and you're like, wow, there's so many layers to this. And I get lost on YouTube and stuff like that all the time with music. Because you start researching, and then I'll pull up Wikipedia and I'll read about every song and how, what happened in the studio when they were recording it and what inspired them. And, I'll look for documentaries on these artists, and, I start with I happen upon a video, and then 3 or 4 hours later, I've had a lesson. Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, that's what's the beauty of modern day technology, is that you can do a deep dive into a band in an evening now, right? And
absolutely
learn a lot. I mean, I didn't even know that Mark was doing soundtrack stuff, and I've heard his soundtracks. I mean, I think he did the recent Hotel Transylvania, which I've watched with my children, and
right on.
And so it's just cool to he's going from that pop aesthetic and then being able to transform himself into this great composer. Sure. So yeah, I mean, back to the main question. So that, a lot of blues stuff like John Mayall, Stevie Ray Vaughan,
good stuff.
Yeah, I love Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah.
And always, I'm always liking the heavier stuff. I've been really into, well, I'm a huge fan of a band called Hot and Fire, and I constantly have them on my iPod or on
Nice.
my desk and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Big influence on me, and kind of like sometimes really extreme stuff. I like heavy stuff like Nile and
Hmm.
Amon Amarth and kind of into that death metal, melodic death metal realm.
Melodic death metal.
Yeah.
Back in my day, that was an oxymoron, but but no, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. So that kind of feeds that part of my personality well. And then, stuff like Tool, the
Hmm.
new Tool record I'm still
Sure.
digesting.
Yes, so am I. I
Yeah,
like it. It's been a
it's
long
great.
time. We've been waiting a long time. It's a
Yeah,
good album, though. Yeah.
it's terrific. And there's with Tool, it's not a one listen and you're on to the
No,
next thing. It's
not at all.
it's a year investment into
Yes.
listening. There's another band called Opeth that I really
Hmm.
like lately.
Hmm.
Their record came out last year. I've been listening to a lot, and it's kind of progressive. Like I like a lot of progressive music as well.
Hmm.
Back to like King Crimson and all that kind of stuff. So
Right on.
yeah, I mean that kind of. I mean, I was listening to Duran Rio a
Hmm.
couple days ago. Love that stuff.
Hmm.
So I listen to everything. Anything. There's two types of music.
Eclectic taste. Yeah.
Yeah, there's good
Two
music and
types.
bad music.
Yeah. There you go. I like that.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go.
Um, I don't know if you remember this, but I very distinctly remember when I was in fifth grade, the very first album that I bought, and back then it was actually a record. And my first was AC/DC Dirty Deeds. And I just remember, which was for a fifth grader, it was a little bit naughty to have that. I was excited. I felt, all grown up, but it was my first record, and it totally made an imprint on me. Even to this day, AC/DC is my favorite band. But I remember what I was going to get at is, we live in such a cool world in a lot of ways, like the instant gratification of music, especially. It's so easy right now. I subscribe to Napster. We have Amazon, Amazon with an Alexa. So like literally any piece of music I want to hear, it's instantaneous. I can download it. I can listen to it on our Alexa, in the car, whatever. And that's so different from when I was a kid, man. Like just even being able to discover music, and then you had to go down to the record store. It was a process, and maybe it was more, paid off because it was so much work to get it. But do you miss those days? Like I loved the actual albums, whether it was a record or a cassette or a CD, and opening it up. I used to read it from cover to cover, and everything from the lyrics to where they recorded, who was involved, and all the pictures. Like I breathed that in. I lived it. Like I just love that so much, and I miss that in today's mediums as far as how we obtain music. There's things that I think are great, but I do miss that. What about you? Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, I mean, because I was a kid through the 80s and then to
Mm-hmm.
the early 90s, so music was, you'd go down to the music store and you purchase it. So I mean, it was always an event.
Yeah.
Me and a couple friends, we'd get an allowance, or if we were working odd jobs, have some money, take the bus down. In Vancouver, it was A&B Sound and I
Mm-hmm.
think Sam the Record Man, and then there was Track Records, which carried more of the underground stuff. That's where you
Sure.
go for the stuff that you're kind of not too sure, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
want to experiment with stuff, but you're
Yeah.
kind of like a bit nervous.
And you'd only
um,
have so much money, and so you're
yeah,
like, okay, how many albums can I get with this money? And I'd always have
yeah,
like 10 that I wanted, but only 3 that I could pick out.
exactly, because you also couldn't preview them, right? So
Yeah,
you
not at
may
all.
have heard a song on the radio or seen a
Mm-hmm.
video, or in a lot of cases, none of that, because the bands were so underground, they didn't have an
Yeah.
exposure. So yeah, I mean, there's something I look back on that very fondly. I love waiting for when a record would come out, let's say, and I'd sleep over at a friend's house and it'd be released the next morning. So we'd take the bus early in the morning and pick it up first thing. And yeah, there was something really cool about that. I mean, nowadays I couldn't see myself doing it, full of responsibilities, I guess.
Right.
But
Yeah. No doubt.
as a kid with nothing really going on, it was wonderful. And yeah, I liked having packages. I liked having, it was more CDs for me at that time,
Mm-hmm.
just to be able to open the booklet, read the lyrics along with as it's playing, and all the
Yeah.
details. I mean, I've always been into production and who produced it,
Totally.
so I love that. And nowadays, as same with you, like the availability is fantastic. Like I'm able to find stuff that I couldn't have found in the old ways, I guess you could say. Or if I did, I would have had to pay like $400 for
Yeah,
it.
totally.
Because it was like a triple import or something,
Hmm.
and so that to me is fantastic. And I've actually discovered more music because of the availability.
Right.
Because I'm not tight with money and like going, okay, this is all I can get, so risks were a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But I miss the aesthetics of it and holding stuff. That's why I think I probably talked to you in private about I've gone to vinyl, so I kind of get the best of both worlds. Where
That's so cool.
I buy not a lot of vinyl, 'cause
Hmm.
it gets up there in cost and stuff like that,
Sure.
and but I pick out some of my favorite records and I put them on vinyl and I'll just sit down and it'll be an experience. I'll sit down and look at the cover and listen to it, and I can run it through my system, and it just has a
There's
unique sound that you can't replicate anywhere else.
absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a Canadian radio station that has a YouTube channel that has artists, and they're mostly Canadian artists, but a lot that are international stars, and they come on and they drop the needle on one of their songs and they talk about, I can't for the life of me remember the name of the YouTube channel,
Mhm.
but it just has hundreds and hundreds of different artists coming in and talking about their songs, and there's just something, and they all 90% of these artists say something very similar, is that there's just such a good feeling about dropping that needle onto the record and hearing
Yeah.
that sound. And I don't know if it might just be nostalgia, it might just be that, but I kind of suspect it's a little bit more. There's a warmth to records, and obviously it's subjective. And there's people that will tell you digital is 100% better, or there'll be people that will argue the same for vinyl. But there is just something. I love dropping the needle on a record.
Yeah, I've always been of the thought that there's no better, I mean, like
No,
they're just
if you
different.
enjoy it,
So
right?
yeah, I mean, I totally, I'm fine with the digital medium. I listen to a lot of music that way. It sounds fine. I mean, some things are, you can tell. I mean, it's overly compressed, or
Sure.
it just has a certain fatiguing sound to it.
Hmm.
Vinyl, it definitely has a certain warmth to it, and I would imagine that there's probably some frequencies in it that we can't even hear that are
Right.
somehow being, there's other things I think going on within the
Yeah.
the music coming off vinyl that might not be consciously,
Right.
um, you know, um, that you can really pick up consciously, but subconsciously there's some kind of vibe going on. So I mean, I don't mean to get all,
Hmm.
spiritual about it, but there's definitely a vibe to it, and it's not for everybody, and that's totally
Dude,
cool.
what is music if it's not spiritual? And I don't mean in a religious way, but like,
Yeah.
I think every music imprints on everybody. You can pretty much anybody, you can play a song from their past or whatever, and they will remember the first time they heard it, or, like it imprints on events in our lives. There's so many songs or artists that I listen to, and boom, I'm instantly, back 20 years or something with a certain mood or a certain feeling. I absolutely think there's spirituality to music.
Yeah.
It evokes emotions and feelings like nothing else to me.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, there's, I can't imagine a day without it. And as you said, when I look at my history and when I reflect on my life, it's all revolved around the music at the time.
Yeah,
It's situations in my life where there was certain music around that time, and if I hear that piece of music, I can remember that time much
totally.
clearer. So yeah, no, I agree, and I think that I think it kind of bothered me a little bit. I'm not the only one that it felt like music was not maybe cheapened a little bit. I think with technology,
Mm.
in terms of you know free downloading, and I don't want to get into that whole discussion, but um, a lot goes into making music, and a lot of artists put
Yes.
their heart and soul into it, and I think it's changed now. I think that, but there was a time there it was kind of really depressing that you know it was easier to spend $2 on a cup of coffee than spend $2 on a piece of music
Yeah.
for a segment of the population. But
Yeah.
I feel that things are moving in a more positive direction now, and there's a renewed value in music.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, that kind of segues into my next question, which might, I don't want to get you in trouble or anything like that, or
Yeah.
myself. I don't want to offend anybody in the audience. And this will probably sound like a typical, from me, it'll sound like a typical old guy going, kids these days and back in my day. But it's not that. I've seen a lot of discussion, about this kind of take on modern music, which and now. This isn't just. I don't want to make a blanket statement, and just say all music today is awful, because I certainly don't feel that way. I think there's incredible artists out there, but I do often see the comparison to today's music, modern music, to music from the past, whether it's the 20th century or maybe even the early 21st century. In just that. Because it's so, almost pre-made, and there's the whole electronic music, and you can almost write a song without really being a musician. And there's, DJs, don't get me started with that. There's a lot of people that, consider DJs as somebody who presses play, Now, of course, I'm not saying any of those are 100% my belief. There are DJs out there that write their own music, and they're incredible. And I have nothing against dance music or electronic music. A lot of the music I liked in the 80s would fall in that genre or whatever. But what is your feeling on modern music? And that could be like singer songwriters and or bands. Do you feel like we've lost some of the heart and soul of music? Do you feel like that still exists, but maybe you have to look harder for it? Do you feel like people are getting away with being considered musicians or artists that might not deserve it? And I think we can say that's always been the case. There's been musicians throughout the years that maybe didn't deserve it as much as others. But then also, of course, and boy, is this a loaded question, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's open to interpretation. It's art. So who am I to say anything about it? And but what is your take on? I know I'm so sorry for such a big question, but modern music versus stuff we grew up with.
Oh boy.
Here we go.
The loaded question. Well, I'll preface it by saying that, like I said about vinyl, in the end, like music, it gets kind of stumbling on myself here.
It's okay. It's a tough question. Don't know where to start, right?
Yeah, no.
Well, do you have an appreciation for modern music?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not aware of the latest, greatest stuff that comes out. I know what I like,
Yeah.
And I know what resonates with me. I'm always,
Right.
I'd always listen to something, and give it a shot. My wife is much more in tuned into kind of newer stuff, and I hear stuff
Right.
from her, and there's some good stuff. You know what I mean? I think a lot of it for me, and I'm not talking about like the real pop stuff, which I have no, I'm not aware of, because I don't
listen to it.
Don't
right.
listen to it, and I just have no interest.
Yeah.
But a lot of it just kind of sounds like stuff I've heard before, and a new take, and it's not the fault of the artists. It's just, a lot of stuff has been written through the decades, and you wonder where it can go from there, like how many times you can reinterpret something.
Yeah.
And I think technology has, one side, allowed a lot of people to have a voice to create music, good or bad. On the other side of it is that sometimes making music, having restrictions is important. Where now, when you're making music, you can have 1,000 tracks, you can have any sound you want, you can take it in any direction. Where, earlier times, you were pretty limited to what you could use. Even a band like Depeche Mode, which I love, came out in the 80s, electronic band.
Yep.
They had a lot of still limitations within how they made their sounds, and how they produced it, and it created fantastic music. So sometimes I wonder if modern music suffers from having too many options to work with, and it also, I think, one issue could be is that the 10,000 hours, which is an old term used
Oh yeah,
to
I
hone
say
your
it to my
craft.
daughter all the time. She doesn't
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah, and it's not the fault of the younger, like a younger I mean, I sound like my dad, geez.
I know we
The
do.
younger generation, it's just the environment that we're all living nowadays. Like, when I was learning how to play guitar, for example, I didn't have any other distractions.
Hmm.
There was TV, I had a Nintendo, uh, but that was it, and those were limited experiences. So
Sure.
the rest of the time outside of school, I was playing guitar. Where nowadays there's so much to do, whether it be games or just social media. So I kind of wonder how many. I'm not saying there isn't, because I'm sure there are, but how many artists are putting in the 10,000 hours that I
Yeah.
think are required to really make some special music. It's all cycles.
Yep.
We could see things turn around, and stuff changes and new voices are heard, and a reinterpretation of the old stuff that I'm completely unaware that can happens.
Yeah.
Um, happens, but I said, like, you know, if people like something, that's awesome. It's if
Enough said, right? If you
Yeah,
like it, you like it.
totally. I'm not one to judge people what they listen to,
Right.
or it's all personal opinion. And I think that it's really important that we allow that to continue for music, because I
Because
think
that's
if
what it's about. We shouldn't be told what we like or what we should
yeah,
listen to. We should find what
totally.
we enjoy, what inspires us, or whatever. I totally agree. The limitations, I think, did bring another level, and that could be applied to bands going further back than Depeche Mode, like just the Beatles.
Oh, totally. Yep.
The Beatles basically invented all kinds of forms of recording
Yeah.
and making music because it didn't exist before them,
Yes.
and out of that came masterpieces.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I do agree somewhat to the limitations, although I think that somebody that was more in tune with modern music might be able to say, also bring up examples of where not having limitations have created masterpieces. And I don't doubt that at all.
Oh yeah, totally. I would not discount that at all. And I think even probably in the composing realm of things, like, film composer and game composers, not having limitations has allowed
Yeah,
a lot of great composers to create fantastic scores, because
sure.
they can have everything at their fingertips. And so, yeah, I do think that's, when I said it's kind of like a balance situation, there's definitely a plus to that.
Yeah.
So
I think for us, I think the exposure point that you made is totally solid. It's not, I think you and I both, and probably different artists maybe, or somewhat overlap, but we could find modern music that we can absolutely appreciate. And I know I do hear songs. My daughter loves, like Panic at the Disco or Imagine Dragons or whatever, and I can absolutely find music within there that I enjoy. I think they're great, talented artists, and so, but for me, it is definitely exposure. My wife and I were watching the Grammys the other night, and I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are.
Yeah.
I've seen them on my periphery. As far as I see them in pop culture, I see them on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. So I know of their existence, but I'm not exposed enough to the music to probably appreciate them. So I think there's a bit of a generational thing there, and that if we were exposed to more, we'd probably find more to appreciate. But I also, and first of all, I bring up the 10,000 hours thing all the time with both my daughter and just family and friends or whatever. I don't hear that used as much as it was used back in the day, and that could have applied to any trade or art form or anything, stand-up comic or anything. Just mastering your craft, but at the same time, I see these prodigies today that are playing 10 instruments by the time they're 10 years old, and because they've had exposure to things that we didn't have. They've been able to, because of modern technology and distribution methods or whatever, they've been able to be exposed to a lot more than maybe I was as a 10-year-old. So I think it definitely goes both ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think some of the stuff I've seen on YouTube of what kids are able to play nowadays. I mean, I wouldn't even.
Insane, right?
It is insane. So, and I love that because it
Yeah.
also shows an appreciation. Whether I like the music or not is irrelevant, but it shows an appreciation to really put your heart and soul into learning something. Which I
Absolutely.
think is extremely important, and especially with music because it's especially kids at that age, if they can get that proficient, you did there's so many places one can go. Um,
I just think music is very powerful, and it's something that we are lacking in today's education. I mean, I don't know
Yep.
like Canada compared to the US, but the arts have just been sucked dry from all the schools. Like there's no funding. And I always get so excited when I see schools that, put a major focus on school band and marching band and stuff like that, because you know how many of our rock stars that we love today got started in school marching band.
yeah,
know?
no, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say both of our kids. I have two older kids. They both went through marching band, and
Yeah.
just being able to see that appreciation of music kind of come out and blossom in a kid is awesome. And and I've seen some of the people that were in their marching band go on to their professional musicians today, and I just think we need that in our world. Music is absolutely a universal language. There's songs that you can press play, and you can take 100 countries throughout the world and they'll know within seconds what that song is, who the artist is, and they'll love it and they'll sing along regardless of whether they know the language. I just think music is super important, and we tend to lose that focus. It becomes more of a anyway. I think it's something we need in our lives. It's not a want, it's a need.
Yeah, I think it goes back to balance, right? And I think
Yes.
that having that artistic element, especially for children. I mean, my kids are in grade school, and they have music classes at school, and I'm happy to see that. So they do singing and they learn percussion and different
Yeah.
instruments come in, and it's just about exposure. I mean, 90% of them might not take any interest into it at all, but subconsciously, it could do a lot of positive things. And there might be the 10% that might have not found a path in their life without it, but they've been exposed to music now, so now they have a path that they can go to for the future, because there's many paths to take in life, and I think music
Absolutely.
and audio is an option.
Yeah.
Is nothing wrong with that, and so exposure is yeah, very important.
Absolutely. All right. So, what is your story? Where did you grow up? And like where did Sean begin?
Sean began well. I grew up in Vancouver. I've been a Vancouver boy my whole life, and
Right on.
yeah,
A healthy music scene, then, right? Because it's not that far from Seattle, and I know you have the Commodore, where we did the first MechCon,
Yeah.
and some amazing artists have come through there. You have a very vibrant and active music scene up there, so that's cool. Growing up in that.
yeah. No, there was always a pretty good scene here. I never partook in it that much.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, I was in a little band and stuff like that, but we were just kind of having fun. In high school, I was fortunate enough to have a really great music teacher. I think
That's
it's
the
actually,
best, man.
yeah, this goes back to the education part of it. Is that
Yeah.
I had a huge amount of support from my parents, which is huge, right? But then having the additional support from teacher
Mhm.
makes all the difference. So when I was in high school, I don't mean to jump around here, but
It's okay.
yeah, I had a terrific teacher, and really allowed me to take extra music classes, and he was always, kind of going to bat for me about doing music as extra electives, and so my music scene was kind of me, kind of localized in my little school band, and then in my bedroom.
Yeah, for sure.
I do, looking back at it now, I wish I would have got out more to see more local stuff, because there was so much great stuff. But
Yeah. Hindsight.
Oh, it was. Yeah.
I remember my high school music teacher very distinctly. I can't remember her name, but she was awesome. And even though I didn't, I didn't accept, maybe it's not like I turned away her what she was sharing with me and turned my nose up to it, but I don't think it connected with me at the time, although I appreciated her as a teacher. But then later, the music that she really loved, I started to appreciate, and then all the stuff that she said came back to me. And you know, I remember her, she would go, "You got to listen to this song. This is one of the best songs in the world." And it was Tom Sawyer. And
nice.
and so you know, being Canadian, I'm sure you appreciate Rush.
Yeah, of course.
And and so she loved it, and she shared that passion with me. And I just remember her sitting down and playing the song, and we just listened to it from start to end. And I liked the music. Certainly, I was aware of Rush, but it didn't. I was into other things at the time. But anyway, looking back, that person, even though I can't remember her name, made a total impact. And sharing her love and the passion for it, and that's what I love to see in, you know, music teachers in high school or younger, is just sharing that passion and what kind of an impact music can have with kids and growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to that teacher as well. I mean, it was kind of the first seeds planted, I think, for composing, because I remember, I mean, I played guitar in the band, but he also tried to push me into the orchestra. You know, we had a little orchestra band, and you know, initially I was going to play cello, but it never worked out. So I played bass, you know, in it. And so he was always, you know, trying to open my very closed teenage minds, you know, musically at the time, to other things. And I look back at that as a little push into that, you know, playing in an orchestra and reading music, and really enjoying the sound of even a small little band orchestra, just enjoying all those instruments gluing together.
Sure.
Definitely had an effect on me later in my life when I decided to, you know, go down a certain path with my career.
So your high school band, was that really your only band experience? Like, did you play in bands after high school?
No, I was, you know, it was the high school band was like, you know, the internal school band, but then I had a little band with a couple of friends of mine. We'd play like, you know, like Van Halen stuff and Metallica stuff and this and that. But after that, no, I was never a live guy or a performing guy. I just never went down that route. I looked at being a session musician after high school, and so I went down to Los Angeles for a year to study at a Musicians Institute, which is free. And you know, my goal, I mean, I think I thought I wanted to be a session musician, but as I progressed through the year, I realized I did not want to be be one. And I actually, it's funny because that experience was very interesting, because I went down thinking that, you know, I'm gonna do this and do this and do this, and you know, I love the guitar, and I came out of it actually resenting the guitar in a funny way. Yeah, and so I really turned to electronic music at that time, because it was the mid '90s and stuff. Like, you know, I heard the Prodigy. I had a guy, which is down there, who I was hanging out with, showed me Nine Inch Nails, and I hadn't heard Nine Inch Nails, and he's like, "Yeah, this is made of a computer," and I'm like, "Wow,
great music."
Yeah, I just like it was like my head exploded. I'm like, I can't believe this, right? And so, I know I've been a Nine Inch Nails fan or Trent Reznor fan since then, and so that really, you know, I came back and I was just kind of, okay, I kind of lost my love for guitar, and I really like electronic music, so kind of dabbled, you know, trying to do. I had a buddy of mine, we worked on some kind of like dancier stuff, like Prodigy sounding kind of stuff, and kind of, you know, just trying to figure my way out, you know.
That's the song Firestarter, right?
Yeah, it was Firestarter, and it was
they were good.
They were great. I mean, they were, especially at that time, because we just, growing up in Canada and in Vancouver, it was a heavy kind of rock and folk scene, right? So like electronic music, like the Prodigy or the Orb,
it was punk.
Yeah, it was totally unique. Like it was, you know, nobody. Some people looked like I'd play it, and they look at me like I was like, you know, Frankenstein or something like that, right? And so yeah, I got really into that. And I think that was another step in my eventual evolvement as a composer and a musician, was being open this whole new realm, and plus using computers. Like that was my
Hmm.
first, like, wow, okay, you can make all this music using computers, and I can record stuff into it. And yeah, so I just kind of moved around, um, not really doing much, just kind of trying to find my way, as you can say. And
Yeah.
I eventually kind of had this epiphany that, like, well, I like video games and I like music.
Marriage made in heaven.
Yeah, so and then I just kind of started that slow journey. I just made a decision one day. This is what I want to do, and um, whatever I need to do to get to where I want to go, it's fine. I realize the unknowns and the sacrifices that will have to be made, and I just went for it, and just started putting together little demos, and at that time emailing companies and
Hmm.
doing free stuff, and kind of moving my way up. um
So I'll come back to the
yeah.
process of you hooking up with Piranha Games in
Sure.
the video game industry, but going
Yeah.
back to
Yeah.
getting burned out on the guitar.
Yeah.
Like so I think this is a very good example of the difference between an actual musician who lives and breathes music, and me, which was a poser, a complete poser. I got into music pretty much and being in bands for the girls. I can pretty much say that's 99% of the reason that I got into music. And
Yeah.
and which is also why I sucked at it. I eventually, after years of being in bands, I learned chords, and I enough to pose. Um, but I looked around, and all my friends in the band were just way better musicians, and so that's what made it so that I eventually became a studio engineer, and then basically the business side of the music, because I realized I'm not these guys. I'm not, I don't have the 10,000 hours. I'm not going to put in the 10,000 hours. And it, like I said, it was all about the girls for me. So for me, it was all about guitar, and I was
Yeah.
actually a keyboard player. But I picked up the guitar in a few of our songs just to play some power chords, because I wanted the girls, and they don't
Yes.
look at the keyboard players. So, or they didn't in the mid 80s or 90s with the
Totally.
music I was listening to.
Yeah.
What do you think got you burned on guitar? Was it just because there were a million guitarists in LA at that time, and a dime a dozen, or it was just we were getting inundated with guitar music? What made you turn away from it for a little bit?
I think it was the dime a dozen, and I think the culture around it at the time. I don't know. I've always, and I'm, for better or for worse, sometimes I will turn my back on something um that is, like, I think I was so involved in it at the time, and everybody was doing it. I'm like, okay, well, I just feel like another number here. So I turned my back on it to kind of step outside of that,
Right.
out of it. And I started talk, even when I was down there, I'd start kind of just having discussions with people, talking about all these bands that nobody heard of, just to cause problems, really. And
Yeah.
I think it was, yeah, I think just it just, yeah, I think it was just a dime a dozen thing. And I also was like, I don't know if I want to. There was something inside of me that I wasn't sure at the time, but looking back at it now, is that I actually wanted to create my music. I think playing other people's music as a session artist,
Right.
it started to really lose its appeal to me at the time.
Can you read
Um,
music?
yeah, I can read music. I mean, I'm a bit rusty.
Hmm.
I actually just I studied classical for a few months with someone before I went down there, and so I actually, funny enough, I just dusted off that book
Right.
over the holidays to start kind of getting back into reading, because I actually love reading music. I love the theory behind music.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting. So yeah,
It's math, right?
it is math. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a danger of getting boxed in.
Yes.
Um, which I've always,
Some of my favorite, most talented artists cannot read a lick of music.
Totally.
Some people that I think are also equally amazingly talented could read like nobody's business. But I definitely see that if you, like I've worked with studio musicians who can, well, only read music, and if you tell them to improv at all, nothing happens.
Yeah.
They just look at you blankly like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. And I think that can be the danger, right? Where I still think, music is um it's a personal voice, right?
Yes.
So I think it's the education part's really important, and it's a huge part of a journey of of honing your craft. But there's also the part where you need to be able to just not be. Music should have no limitations, and there should be no
No,
boxes to put in,
no,
because
no bounds. No.
yeah,
Yeah,
you defeat the purpose. Like,
absolutely.
you totally defeat the purpose. But yeah, so I mean, back to the main question, I just lost my love of it, and
Sure.
it took a long time for it to come back. I think it was always on the periphery, and I was always kind of dabbling with it. But to be honest, I mean, I used to, at the time, I mean, I was I was totally into all the shredding and all that kind of stuff. I could do all that stuff, but I just got bored, to be
Gotcha.
honest. And working of music, like of keyboards and computers at the time, was a challenge, and it was much more at the time, like, interesting, I guess.
So what's your go-to now? If you get a little melody in your head or something, are you picking up a guitar or are you sitting down at a keyboard?
Probably guitar now. It's funny. I have kind of had this turnaround, where I've embraced my love of the instrument, and so now it's kind of my go-to in terms of, like, putting down ideas. Those ideas might come out in a song that has no guitar in it, but that'll be the place I start, because I'm not the best, like, pianist. I can't, like, I can play keyboard and I can get
Right.
myself around it, but when you have an idea of something, there's nothing worse than trying to, like, figure something out, right? And so with a guitar, I can just, like, let it go, let it all come out, hit record and just let it come out, and then I can take from that and 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 then build a song out of it. Unlike where keyboard, if I have, if I'm trying to do a string thing or whatever, I'm like, oh, it's not sounding the way I want it to, because I can't technically play that the way I want it to be.
Mhm.
So I try and I've removed myself from that process and
Yeah.
go with something that's comfortable, unless it's a soundscape, where I'll look for, just kind of more of a vibe.
Mhm.
So I'll find different keyboard sounds or different kind of ambient sounds, or a percussive thing. I'll bang out some stuff on the keyboard, but
Sure.
generally melodic ideas will now come from the guitar and then get transferred to other sounds.
Sure. Right on.
Yeah.
So now you said you kind of discovered the idea of video games and how audio could play into that and the potential career. How did that all come about? Like, what was your first video game job, and how did that all come about for you?
My first job. That's a good question.
Do you have
The-
that paycheck in in a frame up on your wall?
No, I should though. Um, what was it? I did, and it's really embarrassing, because this would have been 2001,
Yeah.
2000. Um, and it was like a tabletop war strategy game that was put into, like, a PC environment. And oh, for the life of me, I am very embarrassed. I can't remember, but I just did a couple music tracks for it, and it was my first paid gig, and
Nice.
which was pretty awesome, because prior to that I was doing a bunch of free stuff. And um, oh, now I'm kicking myself that I can't. I actually have the disc in a box somewhere.
Do you remember what
Um,
kind of music? Like, what did
yeah,
they?
it was orchestral. It was kind of like orchestral beds. At the time it was. I mean, it's kind of funny actually calling it orchestral now, because I'm sure if I listened to it, I would probably, run out of the room screaming, because I didn't have orchestral samples. It was using, at the time, I had an old Roland 1080, and so I was using all the sounds with that to try
Sure.
and emulate an orchestra. I think I had in a sampler, I had an Akai S2000
Yeah.
sampler, so I might have had a few patches on there that I had dug up somewhere to try and emulate orchestral stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty poor, but you got to start somewhere.
You absolutely do. And that's every creator that I've ever talked to, whether it's music or an artist that's drawing or painting or people that create YouTube videos, and look at me, our podcast that we did 10 years ago. We all look back and cringe, but that's like you were saying, that's part of the 10,000 hours. It's learning. Totally. It's learning what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like, and just moving forward. And I can imagine your feeling of getting your first paid gig and being able to get paid to do music. What a good feeling.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Like it definitely was like a confidence booster, or kind of also like a sign that, this is like all my friends are off doing different things, or they were in school, or they had kind of proper jobs going on, and I never went that path. So to be able to actually make a bit of money doing something in audio at the time was pretty awesome. So it just kind of grew from there. I mean, I did some more work at the same company, a bunch of smaller little games through the years, and kind of started to try and bang on doors and look for new opportunities. And because I didn't go to school to learn any of this, I was definitely learning on the job. And I mean, I'm still learning.
Sure.
I mean, it's never
every
end,
project, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even the MW5 stuff, like now I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, this should be different. That should be different. I don't like that, this and this and this.
Of course.
But back then, it was a real learning process. And so I was quite fortunate that I was able to find projects and make a living, or get paid for it, at least at the time. I mean, I had to work another job, kind of moonlighting composer, working through the day, right? Didn't get much sleep, but
almost all of the musicians I hung out with or knew back in the day, that was the case. It was, so back then, to be a working musician, either you struck gold and you were a rock star, which sounds like you didn't even have that aspiration to be a rock star.
No, it's when I was really young, like when I was first playing the guitar, and I was really into the the MTV generation. But I remember I was watching a video of a band, and they were playing to like 20,000 people, and just something kind of like told me that that is such a unique, the chances of that happening are so slim.
Yeah.
That it just, the desire, I just didn't have the desire to go and tour clubs, to be honest. It's not my thing. It's for a lot of people, but I'm a homebody.
Yeah.
I like to be home.
And
I like
you
to be
always
in my
were.
Yeah, always was. Only child, just kind of
Sure.
like to be by myself. And nowadays in my studio, I'm not one to go out and tour and live on a bus and all those other wonderful experiences.
Man, I was so opposite, and to me, you're a rare bird as far as musicians go. At least as far as who I've been exposed to and met. I used to daydream about touring shitty clubs in a van, and it just roughing it. I would read the music magazines and all these punk bands going out there and their experiences, and I wanted it so bad, but again, I think that all comes down to I wanted it for the wrong reasons. But as I was saying, to make music back in the day, you either struck gold, and nobody did that I knew, or you got really lucky and you found an in and you were doing like jingles or whatever, writing jingle music, and or other working musicians I knew were playing some big club. They were the house band or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like there were as many opportunities to be a working musician back then as there are today. I may be wrong, but that was just from my perspective. I feel like now today, there's a lot more opportunities, which also produces a lot more competition.
Yes.
But yeah. So from doing that initial project that you did, your first paid gig in the video game industry, how did you go from there to finding Piranha Games?
Well, so that was about 2000, 2001. So I was continuing kind of working on other project. I did, what started to happen is I started to get bigger projects. So I was moonlighting pretty much, and then I started to pick up some projects. I did a pretty big, like a chess game, and then I did a game that
what is chess music like?
Really ambient, really chill, but it was a big paycheck for me at the time, right? Like, so I wrote like
nice.
a bunch of music, and it was just kind of bedded music to be in the background.
Yep.
And
I love chess, by the way.
Yeah, totally. And so it was a lot of fun to write for. And
cool.
I remember I And I was getting paid in US dollars as well. So at the
Right.
time, the exchange rate was through the
You were
roof.
making
So
bank.
yeah, totally. I had no responsibilities and all this kind of stuff. And so,
Yeah.
I got that gig and it paid well. And then I was moving and then I was picking up some smaller stuff. And then I got another large project. And then I just have decided to be like, okay, I'm just gonna do this, full time. Like I'm going to quit my job
Mm.
and just go for it. And the risks for me at the time were nil. I mean, I didn't have hardly an overhead. I didn't have kids, so I didn't have
Right.
anything that would make you think differently.
Right.
And within it, and so it was going well. I was picking up a lot of projects, and then during that time, probably about 2004, I met Brian Hughes, who used to work with Piranha. He was their initial sound designer,
Mhm.
and I think he did music for. I happened to meet him at a local audio group, and we got on pretty well and stuff like that. And he was leaving to go work back east. I think it might have been Ubisoft at the time, can't remember. And he recommended me to Russ and Brian,
Nice.
and so yeah, I mean it's hard to believe it's been 16 years. So I met with them and we got on fine, and then Brian left. Brian back east, not Ekman, but Udes, and then they hired me onto a project at the time to do just sound design because Brian had finished the music, and I hadn't done sound design yet, or I'd kind of dabbled in it, and so it was great because it was a situation where, cool, this is something I can learn and do, and it'll give me another avenue for employment, right? Because I think when you go into audio, as much as you know, in the grand scheme of things, I'd love to do just music, but in reality, it's it's a hard, not a hard, but it's there will be challenges along the way to go that path. So having a bunch of options to choose from, that you can work on, I think is really important. So
Yeah.
I jumped on that to do just the sound design, and then it just kind of went from there. I've been working on pretty much most projects with them since then. There was a handful that did not, but pretty much most of them. I mean, Brian and Russ have been great to me. I mean, I'm very thankful that they have kept me around. So
Yeah. Good guys.
they're really
Now,
good guys. Yeah.
sound design.
Mm.
I've somewhat been interested in it my whole life as well because I just like audio.
Yeah.
I've never dabbled in sound design, but I remember like, when Star Wars came out, reading everything I could about how they made the sounds, like the classic one, the blasters. I think it was somebody tapping on a metal fence, with the, like,
Yeah.
do, and then they, adjust it or whatever. Do you at this stage in your career, do you enjoy music and sound design equally? I mean, obviously, it's great to have more skills in your bag so that you can, obviously be more valuable to an employer or whatever, and
Yeah.
be able to do a myriad of things. But do you find them equally fulfilling to you, doing sound design as well as music, or do you still prefer music over audio?
Um, it depends on the day.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, generally, I think music is a little bit more fulfilling for me because I think a lot of the process that goes into creating music and producing music and mixing music, I have just a really general strong interest in.
Hmm.
Not to saying that those processes don't transfer over to sound design, but there are just something about the creation aspect of music that I just definitely makes me feel a little bit more fulfilled.
I
With that
understand that.
with that being said, though, you know, with sound design, maybe doing the individual sounds can be a bit, sometimes a little not tedious, but be a bit of a drag. But when you put them into a game, for example, and then you have it all come together, it's almost like the sound design comes together as an orchestra, right? Or as a
Sure.
band, like all the pieces come
The
together.
layers. Yeah.
The layers, you kind of mix those around, and it's like, okay, this is really cool. Like, like when mixing MechWarrior 5 with all the sound design, like, working on some of those sounds individually, I was like, oh God, like,
Sure,
when's
sure.
this gonna end? But then putting them in game and then, mixing them around, I was like, wow, this is fun, this is fulfilling because it's I feel like it's a full soundscape that I'm working with. Um,
Well,
so
sticking with the sound design,
yeah.
how did you grow, or how did the process change, or what did you learn from doing the sound design on MechWarrior Online to MechWarrior 5? Well, first of all, I always appreciated your sound design in MechWarrior Online, obviously, but I think you just did a phenomenal job with MechWarrior 5. And
Thank you.
it's not a reflection on MechWarrior Online, but
Yeah.
like, how did you grow? What informed you from your process of doing MechWarrior Online first?
Well, I think, like anything, as you do something and you evaluate it, you go, okay, well, what could be better? What can I do that can be better? And, MechWarrior Online was my first real move into more of a visceral or science fiction type sound design.
Hmm.
Prior to that, it had been more real world or more just as far removed from um, the kind of walking around in giant robot concept. And so when I came to MechWarrior 5, I mean, after so many years, I mean, on MechWarrior Online, I had, besides knowing more of what I want, my skill set has improved because, I was always looking at new ways to make things sound better, how, studying other games or films, how can I make this, how can I make that sound better or sound like this? And it's one thing to hear how you want things to be in your head, but it's another thing to be able to take that and translate it into an actual, in your digital audio workstation, right? To,
For
to to
sure.
make it come out of your speakers the way you hear it in the head. And so working on MechWarrior Online and having so much time to um, work on that project, I think really was like a school of
Hmm.
sorts. I was able
Boot
to
camp.
just boot. It was a boot camp,
Yeah.
for Mech 5. So when Mech 5 started to come to fruition, I was like, okay, I had a pretty good vision of how I wanted the sound design to go. I wanted it to be a bit more visceral. I wanted just a different vibe to it, and I think that it's a more. I mean, another thing too is the tools as well. Looking into this as well is that the tools for MechWarrior 5 um, are much more robust than MechWarrior Online. The tools are fine and they did the job, but MechWarrior 5, we use a middleware program called Wise, and it having tools where you're going, oh, I like to do this, and then you're going, oh, I can actually do that now.
Right.
Really makes a difference instead of trying to like hack things around or do workarounds, and
Mhm.
the middleware tools that we had allowed allowed me to try some things and do some stuff that helped with the sound. I mean, a lot of it came to mixing. I mean, there's a huge amount of side chaining going on, right? And that allowed me to really beef up certain sounds, unlike in MechWarrior Online, where you're in this mech, and so you have a huge amount of your headroom taken and your frequency, especially on the lower end, right? Like it's all
Hmm. Hmm.
gone from the footsteps and the
Right.
engines. Um, and there was no real side chaining features, but in MechWarrior 5, I could sidechain all that stuff out in combat, so explosions and the weapons can have a bit more oomph to them.
Right.
So
Which they do.
it's which they yeah. So it's things like that that I wanted to do in MWO, and I also just knowing how to mix and create sounds. Like you do it over and over and over and over. You just get better and better and better at it, and you learn how to use compressors better. You learn how to use limiters better. You start to get a better ear for different frequencies, and that was kind of all those learning steps up to MechWarrior 5 that I was able to put into the sound and the mix of the game.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a little bit. You mentioned some of your tools, your toys. I'm going to ask you some
Yeah.
questions about your toys. But first, you mentioned that MechWarrior Online was kind of your first venture into sci-fi. Are you
Yeah.
familiar? This is just a reference. Are you familiar at
Yep.
all with Neil Norman?
No.
Okay, so he does all kinds of electronic reinterpretations of some amazing sci-fi, like old school stuff, like
Yeah.
2001: A Space Odyssey. He does
Okay.
TV shows like
Yeah.
Airwolf and all these themes that we've grown up with, or that I grew up with, and he does electronic versions of it. I totally dig him. Might want to check him out. Neil Norman.
Yeah.
He's
okay.
a cool,
Well, very cool.
cool artist. Now, but back to your toys, because actually a lot of people within the community were wondering, and we'll get to some of the community questions in a little bit,
Yep.
but we're wondering what your favorite toys are. Like, can you say like maybe your favorite guitar, your favorite keyboard, maybe a rack item that you love? What are some of your favorite toys? Because I know,
Oh, wow.
man, going into music stores, and I used to spend 6 hours. I'd go into a
Yeah.
music store and I'd be there just playing everything, testing everything. Musicians' toys are fun.
Totally. Wow.
Another big question, I know.
Another big question. Well,
Well,
picking
what's
my
your
favorite,
what's your main axe?
I mean, that's like picking your favorite child.
I know it is. So
Um,
do it.
Oh, jeez.
They're not listening. I won't.
No,
I won't
I'm
let
looking-
them hear.
I'm looking at
They're
all of them
looking
right
at
now.
you right now. Pick me. Pick me.
Well, I think the one that has the most history,
Mm-hmm.
is I have a Les Paul Standard from the early '90s,
Ooh, nice.
black, and I put some EMG pickups in it, and
Nice, dude.
that kind of is my. Yeah, I think I have the most attachment to, probably historically, and it's as it ages. I mean, it's 25 years old now, or whatever it may be. It just sounds better.
Dude, right?
Yeah,
Some of those old guitars are just, you can't recreate it with all the
yeah.
knowledge that we have and the technology. I don't even know how to put it into words, but yeah, some of those old guitars, you just can't. They're just beautiful.
There's something about the wood and the way the wood
Mhm.
matures and it dries out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but funny, it got work on the MW5 soundtrack, but it didn't get a ton compared to other guitars, just because of the tuning aspects. I mean, I have it in D standard, but most of the MechWarrior 5 soundtrack was done on like more like a baritone guitar and an 8-string guitar and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
That one did more kind of just supplementary lines and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess if I was to pick one, that would be it. All my
That's
other
your baby.
guitars are crying. They're looking
Yeah.
at me.
You
So,
love them too.
I do. I have like 7 or 8 of them, so they're all.
Dude, the thing
Yeah.
with musicians and instruments is you can never have enough. I mean, you can,
No.
you're limited by money, you're limited by space,
Yeah.
but like, I mean, as a keyboardist, I had like 5 or 6 keyboards that, they cost back in the day $2,000 each,
Totally.
It's-
Yeah.
so it's hard. You always want more because
Well,
there's
now
so many-
Craigslist too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always kind of, because I know like I'm capped. Like I think my wife would abandon me if I bought any more guitars. So I'm kind of capped on my guitar purchases at the moment. But I'm always
Right.
on Craigslist, kind of checking stuff out. Like, oh, I'd love to get that, or I'd love to
Mhm.
get this. Chris,
What do you want most right now? Oh, I'm sorry, go with Chris. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, no, Chris from Piranha,
Mm-hmm.
he's a guitar player, and so we're always chatting about guitars. And he just sent me a
Nice.
link to. I have a Martin acoustic.
Yeah.
But he sent me a link to a Dreadnought version of it, and I
Oh
was just
man,
like,
they
"Oh,
have
man,
great
if-
sound. Yeah.
Yeah, if I had the money right now, or
Sure.
no cap. So Craigslist is dangerous, but yeah, I mean, I'd love to get a Strat.
Mhm.
A Fender Strat. I mean, most of my guitars, I have a couple of Les Pauls, and
Yeah. I've
you know,
always
I-
been a fan of Les Paul. I
yeah,
just
I
love
Les
the
Pauls.
the look, the style. I love some of my favorite guitarists. Just again, I'm a freaking poser. So I just they look cool.
There's something about a Les Paul. I agree. I just
Yeah.
the humbuckers, the sound, the weight of them. I mean,
Yeah.
my black standard, like it's like a tree trunk when you put it around your
Mhm.
shoulder, right? But yeah, I'd love to buy a Strat.
Yeah.
It's one thing I'm missing, the single coil. All my guitars are humbuckers.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get a single coil guitar in there. And I'd also like to, I mean, I have an 8-string, I'd like to get a 7-string. And I mean, there's so many guitars. I'd like to buy a classic Randy Rhoads Les
Yep.
Paul
Yep.
from the 80s as a custom. but it's like $4,000. So
It's like being a car collector, like Jay Leno's garage or whatever. You want Sean Colton's music room. What we all want really is, I don't know what you have up in Canada, but Guitar Center down here. You walk in and there's 500 guitars on the wall, and that's what we really want.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
right.
I mean, Lon McQuaid's is what it is for us up here, and it's the same thing. It's a giant wall of guitars, and you go in there and you're just like, oh, like I have to turn around, I have to leave because
I know, dude.
I gotta walk out.
I remember those days. It's so expensive being a musician.
Totally.
So what's on your Amazon wish list as far as gear? It doesn't have to be a guitar, but what's like something that you want?
I'd like to get more outboard gear. It's one thing I don't have a lot of. A lot of it's done internally. There's a lot of fantastic plugins I've been able to research out that I use that emulate a lot of external gear. But I'd like to get a really nice preamp. One thing I'm missing is a really nice a preamp. Probably some compressors, like just some of the classic old gear.
Yep.
That I would love to get. I just you're looking at a lot of money, and it's just also like I have to look at like the costs and like it's smarter for me to buy like a newer string library at the moment than buying a $2,000 piece of external
practical
gear. Yeah, I have to be very practical, and then that's one thing I've always actually been is very practical. Like as much as I would love to spend it all on tons of gear, I'm very practical on what I buy and what I use. I mean, my big purchase last year was new studio monitors. Which was awesome. They were very expensive, but
what'd you pick up?
They're called Atom monitors, and they're 877Xs, and they're awesome. They're really, really sweet monitors. So, those are more of the kind of purchases. So, like, if I was to say a favorite piece of gear for myself right now, it's my new monitors, because they just translate the music and the sound in a way I've never been able to experience before.
That's awesome. When I used to record and was running a studio, we had top of the line studio monitors. But do you like, I would always mix something and then go play it on every, I'd play it on a car, in a car system. I'd go play it in somebody's house system. I'd play it on Walkman or what, trying to always see, because everything sounds good on studio monitors, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I do. It's funny because sometimes I would do it and I would be like, I'd want to change everything because it would just not sound the way I want. And I find when you start throwing in deadlines, it becomes very difficult. It's also very dangerous because you could, if I took all the MW5 stuff and I started playing it in every speaker in the house, like I wouldn't have finished it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like doing that as well, but it's also a dangerous place to go. I have to put trust into my monitors and my headphones and just, I reference a lot. I'll just reference music back and forth, professionally made music. And other gear, I have a Kemper profiling amp, which is basically a 2 rack space box that emulates every guitar amp and cabinet you can think of, and it's pretty fantastic. A lot of bands and a lot of studios are starting to use this now because it captures the vibe, not 100%, but really close. Really close.
You kids these days, man, you got everything. What we used to go through. I mean, we would have to buy all the equipment, to capture certain sounds. That's one of the awesome things about technology. But on the other hand, you're not, maybe not you, but if you have that and you can rely on it, then maybe you don't learn so much about manipulating amps and speakers and stuff to make the sound that you want or whatever. Pros and cons again, right?
Totally.
Technology.
I mean, I'd love to do that, but I also it's a working environment. So when I'm trying to get a soundtrack done, I need to be able to dial in.
You need it now.
Yeah, if I need a messy boogie sound, that's what I'm gonna get. If I want an old Marshall, bang, it's cheaper instead of having all those amps and
absolutely. In the right hands, it's an awesome tool. Now, you mentioned the pressure of a deadline, and that was kind of actually segues perfectly into my next question, which is the process. I brought this up when in December when we were up in Vancouver. Just the pressure. What is it like and I'm sure you can relate with people who, maybe sign with the label and they've got 6 months to put out an album or whatever.
Yeah.
That pressure of, okay, here's a project, MechWarrior 5, and it's coming out here, and the music needs to be done. It's not like ordering something on Amazon, right? Where it's just, you want it and here it is, it's delivered.
Totally.
What does that do to you when you know that you've got this deadline looming and you have to create a bunch of stuff out of nothing? Nothing exists right now, and by that deadline you have to have all this music, all this effects, all that. What's that feeling like when you first step in that direction of having a project like that?
Yeah, at first it's a bit of panic.
I would imagine.
I think, just to take MechWarrior 5 is because as doing the music, I'm also doing all the sound design as well. So
Right.
I
It's a
had
huge
it was
amount of work.
yeah, it's a huge amount of work. So it was definitely like, whew, okay, how am I going to do this? And in the end, you just have to start looking at it day by day,
Yeah.
and start just pushing ahead as best as you can. And you also have to make decisions really quick. Um, I mean, for me, my crunch time started last February, 12-hour days, weekends, and then it moved up to like 17, 18 days near
Yeah.
the end. And I think I made changes in my lifestyle to try and give me as much time as possible, because in the end, it's all about time and trying to have as much time as possible. Um, so I just made a handful of decisions about how I can facilitate that. What can I do to make me not be in panic mode, and to make me, because you have to be creative in all of this as well. Um, and to be honest with you, I think I liked having an end date, because I could have spent 3 months on one song,
Absolutely.
So when I first started writing for this stuff, really the real sessions took place last February. I had written some stuff, and they were in the pre-demos or the demos of the game, but the real like meat and potatoes, I guess you can say, started in February. So I was kind of down to 2 weeks per two songs, writing out as much as I can get during those times, and then putting it into game. And then hearing it in game, and then taking all those out, and then re-demoing them. And so it
Right.
wasn't a situation where I could write all the music and then I had until, I mean, at that time it was September release, so I could write the music until August and put it in the
Mm-hmm.
game and it's to go. I mean, I had to have the first round of it done by late spring or late spring, pretty much. And then take that, improve upon it, and then mix it, like give it, like record all the guitars properly, mix it, and everything else that goes is involved with that, to have that done by September at the time. So as I said, like I actually work pretty good under pressure. I've realized, because it makes me make decisions. And it also, I've realized for me personally, is that I tend to have my best ideas at the first push. So when I work on something and I get an idea and it starts just flowing out, in the past, I would come back and analyze it and try and change it. But under pressure, I didn't have that time. So, and I felt that, well, you know what? I think the initial ideas coming out are good. Like they will work, kind of thing. So that was a nice, I think, a learning process about myself, that my gut instinct initially was probably on the right path. And when you have that kind of confidence, it's a bit easier to move forward, because you're not going to worry as much. Oh, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do this?
Right.
It's more just kind of like, okay, just you know follow your gut instinct, and go with that. Like, if all that being said, there would be changes I would make, and if I had more time, or if I was just focused on just the creative aspect of it, because you're also dealing with technical and creative, and you're switching back and forth a lot. So, where I'd like to have a whole day of just being creative, that's just not the case. Like, I have to switch gears and become more technical
It's
halfway through the
interesting.
day. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like for if you let it, a song would never be done if you had
it
that
would.
kind of, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
if no
totally.
matter what, even if you thought it was done today, if you came
Yeah.
back 6 months later or a year later, you're gonna go, oh nope, I can do this, and you could literally have a perpetual song that never gets finished.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was really, I mean, that was the toughest for me. Not getting the in-game stuff, but the standalone soundtrack was probably the most pressure because it didn't have the game to hide behind.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, absolutely.
the music is in the game is that you can hear it, but the
You've got a lot of other stuff going on at the same
yeah,
time.
and you're inside of a mech, so
Yeah.
that takes up so much space that you really don't hear a lot of the music. But when it's naked, so they as a soundtrack release, that's where I started to get, it was really challenging for me because I'm trying to finish the game, but at the same time, like mixing it and like re-recording guitar lines because there's like some of these tracks have like 80 guitar lines on them, right? So
Mhm.
there's just a huge amount of stuff, and that was a huge amount of pressure. I think the last 2 months for me were the toughest to get it all done, to get it mixed, and and to be presentable as a standalone. Um, and then like I mastered it myself, and
Yeah.
I think looking back on
Which
that,
again, that's, there's people who that's all they do is
yeah,
master albums or
exactly,
music. Yeah. So
totally,
so you're wearing a bunch of hats.
yeah. I mean, I was mastering it like the day before I had to
You were
send it
writing,
off.
recording, engineering, mastering, doing the sound audio for,
Yeah.
like everything. I mean, that's a huge undertaking. When the release was delayed,
Hmm.
did that do anything to you? Did you like, oh, I can now go back and do this or
Yeah.
this, or were you done?
That was no, no, no. That was huge. That was really nice because I think that would have been in. I found out, was it when was the announcement, in July or something? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
something like that.
Um, when I heard when I got the news, it was a relief because it would have been done. Things would have been done, but I was just like, it's just not going to be where I want it to be. I just, I mean, you just had that
Yeah, yeah.
nagging feeling in the back of your head, like there was a lot of problems with the sound, wasn't going the way I wanted to at the time. The music was half baked, I guess you could say at the time.
Sure.
I wasn't even like starting to think about the standalone,
Yeah.
which was a huge undertaking as well. So yeah, when the extra 3 months paid a lot of I think I was able to um, make stuff sound more as how I wanted it to. I mean, you could always use more time. Another 3 or 4 months would have been great, but
Yep. But
everybody
then
would say
after
that.
that, another 3 or 4 months would have
Yeah,
been great too,
exactly.
right?
Like, you just got to get it done and do the best you
Yeah.
can. And so, but yeah, those 3 months, those additional 3 months really allowed for things to improve greatly. Yeah, I think the sound would have been, it would have been really hard for me to
Be
um,
as pleased and
yeah,
proud of.
yeah, I mean, because I'm pretty proud of what I did. And I think at that time I would have struggled. I've been really questioning myself at that time. So,
So it's interesting as far as the soundtrack, the standalone,
hmm
the music being separated from the game. I think that's a big thing that people need to check out because it's easy with the game. Like you said, you have so much stuff going on. You got dialogue, you got sound effects, everything going on, just real world noise or whatever. And it's easier to only kind of hear maybe the blaring guitars when they come out, the guitar parts or whatever. And you don't hear a lot of the other more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just mood music almost. And
yeah,
so what I found is when I listened to the album on its own, I just a whole nother layer of appreciation. It is absolutely. I recommend everybody that has access to the digital album, the soundtrack, listen to it. And in fact, I often tell streamers just play that. Turn off the in-game music and just play the soundtrack while
mhm,
you're streaming the game because you can hear it more. Your listeners can hear it more. I found that made me like it even more. Not that I
cool.
didn't like it in game, but I just couldn't hear a lot of the stuff
Yeah,
during certain parts, and so I just didn't know about them. And so when I was able to just sit down and just close my eyes and listen to the album, definitely a whole new appreciation to it.
cool. Yeah, no, and that's kind of what I was hoping for because I mean, it's definitely two different beasts when you're doing the music for in game. There's a lot of variables besides just the soundscape. I mean, also you're inside of a mech, as I alluded to before. So,
Yeah,
it's a kind of a unique situation where, and actually, most of the music is tuned to like is most of the music is done in A minor, for example. The
Hmm.
reason being is because most of the mechs will modulate in A minor. So the engine
Interesting.
sounds will modulate, and I had to
And you
make a
didn't,
decision
yeah,
on this because I couldn't have the mechs modulating at like F sharp, and then I have written a piece of music in F. Like it may not consciously come through, but I
you're
can
gonna
tell you
know. Yeah.
it'll be create a dissonant feel, and
Man, I
so
never would have. I didn't even think about that.
yeah,
I mean, what a huge impact that makes,
yeah.
and especially people that maybe aren't musically literate might not even consider that, and so that sets limitations on what you're doing.
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, it's not perfect. I mean, obviously the mechs modulate up, I mean, I initially when I designed the mech sounds, I had it going up like a scale, right? So it would start
Right.
at A and it would go up to like D or something like that, and I would have 3 or 4 points. Eventually I kind of made it more chromatic because it just felt better for the mech. Excuse
Right.
me. So musically, I had to make sure everything was kind of worked with that because and so most of the music is in like an A or a D, and most of the sounds kind of all mixed together. There are moments when there are changes when I kind of up the tension and whatnot, but it generally has to stay in that layer so it all works well together. So that's one limitation, and also how it's triggered. um, I think soundtrack by itself kind of has more layers and more depth to it. It's not just like, here's a guitar and bam,
Yeah.
bam, 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 bam. There's a lot of, as you said, mood music and ambient music.
Yes.
So in game,
Atmospheric.
yeah, just a lot of atmospheric stuff,
Yeah.
and there's acoustics and nylon strings and this and that, and in but in
Almost like.
game,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say it's almost like I sometimes get a feeling like John Williams and what he would do is Star Wars. The
Mhm.
the music you would hear after the song ended, and it was and you're coming up to a planet or whatever, and it was just that atmospheric mood type music.
Yeah,
And
totally.
yeah,
Exactly what it was. And another thing too is that the way it was in game, the way it's triggered is because it's a fast moving first person shooter, you're kind of going from 0 to 60 very quickly.
yes,
And that was also a challenge because when I initially we started planning out how the music can get triggered in game, I kind of wanted to have more variety in what comes out of the speakers instead of just quiet loud. Um, but it was definitely a bit of a struggle because you would go from point A to point B so quickly, and then
hmm,
you'd be in a big firefight. Looking back on it now, I would definitely make some changes, and maybe the music, different stems would come in, so it's not all in your face. Um, but when you play it in game, that's as you said, you kind of just get that one element of it. Where
yeah,
standalone, you definitely have a much more of the depth to it. I mean, some of the music ties into the story, um, and yeah. So
cool.
not to ramble on.
No, it's okay. I mean, I believe me, tangents all over the place, but this is
Yeah.
something I'm passionate about as well. I mentioned John Williams.
Mhm.
Do you have people, Hans Zimmer or something like that, that do soundtracks that have been doing it for a long time that are inspirations to you? One of my favorite kind of soundtrack or movie slash TV soundtrack type people, I believe he's from Canada, is Bear McCreary.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Huge fan of him ever since
yeah.
Battlestar Galactica. And then he's done a million things since then, and I'm sure he was doing stuff before that, but that was kind of my first taste. And I really appreciate soundtracks, even like Blade Runner.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
they literally can make the art form that they're a part of. Like I can't imagine Battlestar Galactica without Bear McCreary's soundtrack. I can't imagine
Totally.
Blade Runner without that soundtrack.
Yeah.
Do you have any soundtrack specialists that you're really into?
Yeah, I mean, I really like Thomas Newman.
Hmm.
Probably because I liked his stuff like on Wall-E and those kind of Pixar animations. I just
We were
love
just
the
talking about Wally last night, me and my
oh
wife.
oh
Great
no
movie.
way. Like it's one
Yeah,
of my favorite movies and probably one of my
it's
favorite
awesome.
soundtracks of all time. Like I just
Yeah,
love it. So, I love the stuff he does.
yeah.
A guy like John Powell, I mean, he does a lot of the modern day animation stuff. I really kind
Hmm.
of tend to go to animation
Yeah.
composers for whatever reason. I think I just kind of like the quirkiness
Hmm.
of them. And yeah, of course, like Blade Runner is a fantastic soundtrack, and I've always liked the old spaghetti western soundtracks.
Mm-hmm.
And the names are escaping me right now, which is very
Sure,
embarrassing.
but a lot
Yeah.
of amazing music. I totally agree. You
Yeah,
know,
just
all the classic stuff. You know that.
totally.
Yeah, no,
And
I agree.
yeah, many names. I'm sure I'll
Mhm.
forget somebody, but yeah, there's a lot out there to
Right
listen
on.
to.
So now we've talked a little bit about the process of the music. What happens when you need to make your effects? Like, let's say, okay, you're sitting down, you got your AC5 or something, you know,
Yeah.
auto cannon that you need to work on. What do? You sit down, and where do you go?
Well, I have a ton of libraries basically of different cannons, like just weapon sounds. So
Sure.
whether it's probably like, tank gunfires, artillery. And so you take those, and then the next spot I will go to is more. I use a lot of explosions and stuff like that, like cutting the tail off and using the initial impact
Right.
of the explosion to kind of beef it up, and then more layers of like metal impacts. And so you kind of take your initial stock sound and then you just put layers and layers underneath of it to give it a little bit more of a different vibe. And those layers may only be um, subtle levels, but
Mhm.
if you take them out, then
You'll notice.
you notice, and some will be pitched down, you know, 24 points or 12 points, and
Right.
some things are really compressed and whatnot. So it's really, that's kind of, I
Taking
think,
a library and a lot of manipulation and
yeah,
layering and so forth.
lots of layering. And I think, I mean, coming from NWO, like moving on to those weapons for MW5, I kind of already had a bit of a template of where to go. And so I was taking those templates and just making it what would hope to be better and cooler sounding.
Was there any difference between working within the CryEngine and MechWarrior Online and working with Unreal and what it could handle as far as audio?
Yeah, yeah, I felt it definitely. I mean, we used a lot of the work was done in Wise, um, but the integration into Unreal was pretty good, and I felt that it definitely was much more user friendly,
Hmm.
and a lot more ideas could put forth that could be made to work. I mean, I was fortunate enough to work with a couple of programmers who were able to take the ideas and take Wise and then work within Unreal and the blueprints to make it all come to fruition. But yeah, I
Right.
really liked Unreal, and it's also for someone like me who, if I had to go into Unreal and work the blueprints, it's something I can do. Like it's designed in a way that it's not restricted to certain skill sets, I guess you could say.
Right on. Now, Russ has already mentioned, upcoming DLC. Are you working on anything? Can you say that you're working on anything?
Yeah, I'm working on stuff. I I don't want to go too much into details.
I don't want to get you in trouble
Yeah,
either.
I don't know what, I would imagine more information's coming out soon, but yeah, no, I'm keeping busy on stuff,
Cool.
and I would expect, I'd really like to put more music into the game through the year,
Yeah.
and probably take a few different turns, with some different styles and different
Mhm.
ideas. I think it's time to maybe branch out a little bit.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to get to a few community questions
Yeah.
to finish the process. Great stuff so far, though, man. I'm like I
Yes.
said, I've been looking forward to this for a very long time.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I could ramble on forever about audio.
Me too, and we'll see what the listeners think. First question is from Spit. That's his name,
Yeah.
and he's asking, "What digital audio workstation do you use?"
I'm
Or
using
also called a DAW, right? Is
a
that what?
DAW. Yes, I am
Yeah.
using Studio One Pro, and that was a recent switch. I used to be a Pro Tools guy for
Mm-hmm.
15, 20 years, and I still have Pro Tools and I still use it, but pretty much everything has been migrated into Studio One Pro by Personas, and it's a fantastic. I Anybody looking for a new DAW, I mean, DAWs are a funny thing because there's no best one, right? Like
Yeah,
they all they all sound the same. It's all what works best for you in your workflow and what will get you from point A to point B the quickest. And
absolutely.
I tried a bunch out earlier in the year because I wanted to make a switch from Pro Tools. and Studio One just fit. I was just blown away by it. So that's what I use, Studio One Pro.
Cool. When I was in the industry, Pro Tools was just coming about, and
Yeah.
so like we were still using the ADAT machines and tape, and to make edits. I mean, I sat there in the studio watching people cut tape to make edits.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
I'm pretty jealous of like these setups that people have now, just in their freaking bedrooms.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
better than the huge budget studios that I used to work in. It's crazy.
It's phenomenal. And then also what's happened now is that the VST technology has come so far that you can emulate like your SSL boards and your Neve boards.
That's
And
so crazy, man.
I mean, all this stuff. I mean, it's
Yeah.
tape machines and everything. So
That's
Yeah.
so cool. All right. Unnatural flavors. He has a few questions.
Yep.
First one is, what is the rough number of instruments you can play? Are you a multi-instrumentalist? Do you consider yourself that?
yeah, I mean, I can sit down behind a kit and play a beat. It's nothing fantastic, but
Yeah.
it can go. And I mean, I play guitar, I play bass, I play any kind of stringed instrument. Like my son's learning how to play ukulele, so I can play
Nice.
ukulele. And then keyboard. I can play piano. We have a piano. I'd like to learn. That's one thing I like to do is actually
Yeah.
study, piano. But no, pretty much stringed instruments. I can pick one up and make something good.
Okay. Yep. Gooder. His next question is there an instrument or a piece of equipment you'd like to have, but you haven't been able to acquire it yet? I think we kind of covered that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
more guitars.
more guitars, always more guitars. Can you give an example of how long it takes you to go from start to finish? You get an idea or a concept or whatever. How long does it usually take? And obviously this can totally be, vary, but from start to finish, you mentioned 2 songs in 2 weeks. Is that a good measurement?
Yeah, I mean that's not final mix or produced, but in terms of this is also depends on the length of the song. I mean, those songs, most of them are 8 to 10 minutes, broken into multiple parts.
Which is huge. That's super long for a
Yeah.
song.
So, yeah, it's a good question because it really depends on time restraints. If I have to write a 5-minute piece of music by Saturday, I would write it by Saturday.
Right.
The quality level, I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, as I said, I was kind of banging out tracks like a couple every 2 weeks for
Yeah.
this. So that's probably a good measure right there.
Which is fast for writing. Now I've been with, I recorded punk bands in the day that would literally write their song in the studio.
Yeah.
But it's a different level. It's a different beast that you're talking about there, apples and oranges. What do you have any future plans? Now, obviously, you're a contractor with PGI.
Yeah.
Do you have other side projects? Is there anything that you're working on that might be in the future that people that are a fan of your music can look for?
Not at the moment. I was so wrapped up with MW5 last year that I just really was focused on
Sure.
that project that I
And
haven't.
we're thankful for that.
Yeah, thanks. And I haven't been able to really look past that yet. I'm starting to look through the year and look at what else can be done, like with the time. Like Piranha is my priority.
Yep.
And they will be as long as I'm contracted with Piranha.
Of course.
So it's about finding stuff that fits, that won't make me deviate from making me do the best job for Piranha, right? Because
Absolutely.
I feel so fortunate to be a part of. I mean, I have a huge amount of thanks to those guys for, Russ and Brian, and then Matt's the one who initially brought me on to MechWarrior.
Yeah.
So I always feel that loyalty and always to be making sure that I give them 100%. At the moment, no, I'd like to do some other things. We'll see what happens. I mean, I've done other stuff in the past. And this year there might be more time for it, so we'll see.
How cool would it be able to do? Be able to do like a Pixar short or something like that, right?
Oh yeah, I think long-term goals is I'd love to get into scoring to animation and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things I need to work on, but it's where I'd like to go.
Cool. Next question is from @Super Helm Bros. He says, "What is your favorite MechWarrior soundtrack other than your own?" Did you reference any of them? Did you go and listen to them, or did you not want to have that influence your writing?
I tried to stay away and that's no disrespect, because I think the soundtracks. I mean, obviously NW2 is like
It's a great one.
the
It's
great
a
one, and
classic.
there's
Yeah.
a reason for it. You know what I mean? So if I was to pick one, I would definitely say that one. That was my first MechWarrior game as well,
Yeah.
back in the day. But in terms of listening and referencing, no, I was aware, but I just wanted to be a bit careful of. I kind of wanted to Warrior soundtrack, I guess, and there's no disrespect to anything else, and
Totally, dude. I understand that 100%.
I every piece of music for all the universe has its own unique place, and I kind of wanted to keep that for MechWarrior 5. But subconsciously, I bet you there was
Yeah.
Influences there because I've heard them enough, especially the NW2 soundtrack.
Yep. Yeah, it's I can totally understand wanting it to be your own and your own voice and so forth, and not sound like an homage or something or a
exactly.
remake. Star Wolf. The next question comes from Star Wolf. He's a streamer of both MechWarrior Online and MechWarrior 5, and so this is kind of where his question is coming from, which is, have you ever considered live streaming your work or your process on Twitch? There's channels that are dedicated to that type of thing. In fact, there's some amazing musicians that I've watched on Twitch. Have you ever thought of going that route in as far as just another avenue to make money or to share your process or share your work? You mentioned you're not really a live type musician, so maybe that's not your bag.
Yeah, I've stumbling on my words again. It's come into my mind a few times, because I'll be watching similar things myself and then thinking to myself, oh, like maybe that would be kind of cool to do. I think it's a lot of people stream stuff that's pretty amazing already, or I don't. I think I look at it like, what could I offer? What could I show? But I don't know, maybe part of me has thought about showing the work process and going to create one of the tracks for MW5. I mean, especially the differences between, the huge sessions for the in-game stuff, which is like 200-300 tracks of stuff in one session, to like the soundtrack stuff, which is shorter and mixed more like a record. So yeah, I've thought about it. Whether I move ahead of it, I don't know.
I think you would get a lot of support. I know I appreciate those types of streams and people that, whether it's sound design or music, being able to kind of, it's a very personal connection, being able to see them do that stuff over Twitch.
Yeah. I guess I think is, I guess, the little confidence thing, me like, oh, would anybody really like care? You know what I mean? Like, is it, so it's probably just more about me like thinking that nobody's
some
really
insecurities.
Care. Yeah, and speaking and presenting isn't my forte.
Well, you've handled yourself excellent today for that not being your forte.
Thank you. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
Cool, man. Well, I know that there would be an audience.
Cool.
But yeah. So now that's it from the community questions for today. If I missed any of your questions out there, guys, I will be sure to see if I can, send an email over to Sean and see if he can answer any by the next podcast, which I can just cover in the beginning, if I missed any questions that you guys have out there. So, Sean, again, I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out in your day. This ended up being a lot longer because what people don't know is we recorded part of the podcast, and then I realized that the recording wasn't working, so we had to kind of restart. So, and you're not feeling well. You got a bit of a cold going on. So thank you so much for being here and for being my guest today.
Well, I thank you. I mean, I've been looking forward to getting on here and chatting with you about audio, and this has been fantastic. I really loved it, and I hope that
I hope we can have you back.
I'd love to be back anytime.
Yeah, maybe after the DLC and we get some new music and so forth, we'll get you back and talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to get back on and chat some more.
All right, Sean, thank you very much. You have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon.
You too. Take it easy.
This podcast is supported by you, the viewer. Please consider supporting us in the following ways. Subscribe to our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/NGNGTV. Become a podcast patron at patreon.com/NoGutsNoGalaxy. Shop on Amazon using our affiliate link at NoGutsNoGalaxy.net, or shop our new merch store featuring our new NGNG logo at NoGutsNoGalaxyStore.com. This was your local No Guts, No Galaxy MechWarrior podcast. Signing off for tonight. This is Daeron. Until next time, MechWarriors.
It'd be best if you avoid me, but I know you probably can't. You sense something is wrong with me. You can feel it on my skin, but there is more with it. Maybe I can be closer now, but I don't know how. Please don't remove my metal skin, my metal skin, my metal skin, and the wires within. You probably thought it was normal, just a little off. The truth is, at one time I was, but now I'm a robot. Forever